Not long into the flight, the hijackers overpowered the crew and turned the plane back towards the capital. Minutes later, a huge explosion rocked the Pentagon, killing all 64 people in the aircraft, along with 125 military and civilians on the ground.
Throughout the Conspiracy Files program, there was no attempt to understand how hijackers with limited training could have navigated the complex airliners hundreds of miles with such precision. The 9/11 Commission did not explain how Flight 77 could have performed a virtually impossible aerial manoeuvre, and the BBC failed to assess this discrepancy. Dozens of commercial and military pilots have gone on record disputing the official account. Air traffic controllers have commented on how Flight 77 appeared to manoeuvre more like a military plane. Why didn't the BBC interview any of these pilots or air traffic controllers? After presenting the official story, the Conspiracy Files then switched to a clip from Loose Change, the popular internet documentary about 9/11.
Are we supposed to believe that it disappeared?
The programme only looked at one aspect of the argument put forward in Loose Change.
Why is there no damage from where the wings, or the vertical stabilizer, or the engines would have slammed in?
Harder evidence provided in the film does appear to refute the story of a Boeing 757 crashing into the Pentagon.
After this photo was published by American Free Press,
Yet throughout, the Conspiracy Files only selected pieces from Loose Change which were easy to cast doubt on, and the majority of the well-sourced information in the film was never mentioned. The finding of plane parts is not conclusive proof that Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon.
Identifiable parts of the fuselage and engines, and paintwork with the distinctive American airline.
But the programme did not question their legitimacy. There was no mention of the data based on radar readings that directly contradicts the official story. Witness statements are divided. Some refute the official account, and others confirm it. Yet the programme did not address the differences in reporting or attempt to explain what lay behind the contradictions.
Maybe it was closer, maybe it was further away, but it was on that side. None of these light poles over here were knocked down. They were here. None of these were knocked down. They were here.
Official story says they were.
What official story? The only official story would have been the Arlington County police report done after the event. There's no official story other than that. That's the after-action report that was written by Arlington County, the fire department and police agencies that responded along with the United States Pentagon Police, at the time Defense Protective Service. That's the official story. Anything else isn't official. It did not come on this way. I've never seen anything that said it was on the south side of that gas station, ever.
Okay.
Slowed down, something can be seen entering on the far right of this frame just before the explosion. But this evidence is inconclusive. Frames from the second camera, analysed by computer animators, appear to show a plane and smoke in slightly more detail here. But again, it's not definitive.
As the BBC rightly asserted, the CCTV frames released by the authorities are not definitive proof that Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. But that didn't stop the corporation from using an imaginative graphic to suggest it did. Why didn't the BBC show the 16 to 18 foot wide round hole which appeared at the back of the C-ring of the Pentagon? To get there, the wreckage would have had to penetrate 6 reinforced concrete walls. This feat is not explained by official sources, who stated that on impact, the entire Boeing 757 airliner probably disintegrated rapidly as it moved through the forest of columns on the first floor. The independent researcher, included by the BBC, whose study theorised that fire from burning jet fuel caused the structural damage, did not explain the anomalies in the damage either.
Their analysis suggests the jet fuel caused the worst damage.
No air crash investigation was ever made available, so there is no verifiable data to prove beyond doubt that Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. But the BBC appeared to be convinced.
I'm not so sure that we'll ever be able to totally dispel all of the opinions and rumors that have come from this.
You think it will go on being talked about and speculated over for years, decades to come?
Oh, I think that there are people that will never change their minds on it. Yes, because there's no way to really, truly prove it, because 92 or 93% of the remains of the aircraft and the people are still in that hole.
The small crater left by the plane is baffling to many people.
The conspiracy files claim that the 9/11 Truth movement regards the account of Flight 93 as
clear evidence of a government cover-up,
when in fact much of the 9/11 Truth movement accept that the evidence available is contradictory and therefore no firm assumptions can be made. In the absence of an air crash investigation report, no hard conclusions about the fate of Flight 93 can be reached. In comparison to the other major incidents that occurred on that day, there is nowhere near as much evidence to debate, but it appeared the BBC purposely wanted to exploit the critics' weakest arguments.
In a straight line, Indian Lake is just over a mile from the crash site, and the wind was blowing in that direction on September the 11th. But was wreckage found here?
They spent an inordinate amount of time on nebulous issues. Many of them had been acknowledged a long time before the programme aired.
Look at the physical evidence.
But we've talked to the people who were there. We've talked to Wally Miller, the local coroner, who arrived at the scene moments later.
Who went public 4 times and said that he didn't see any drops of bodies, or
yes.
he said it seemed as if the plane let its passengers off beforehand.
Exactly, and what that was a simile. He was talking, it looked as if that had happened.
Proving that researchers have made some miscalculated speculations does not in any way prove the official account correct. The official story is largely based on phone calls made from the passengers. Why then did the BBC choose not to examine these? Was it perhaps because there is credible information indicating the vast majority of the calls were not actually achievable? The conspiracy files looked at one example of where the US intelligence agencies failed to share vital information in the run-up to the attacks.
January 2000, 2 terrorists arrive in California from the Far East. Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midar were known to be active members of an al-Qaeda cell. But it didn't arouse any suspicions when the smartly dressed young men presented their passports at immigration. Their names had not been added to the watch list for terrorist suspects. Al-Hazmi and al-Midar were allowed on their way unchallenged.
Welcome to Los Angeles International Airport. For your safety, please keep your personal belongings with you.
They soon moved into a San Diego suburb and lived openly under their real names. They had come on a mission. And that's exactly what they did. At about the same time, a CIA cable confirmed that one of them was in the country. But this lead wasn't passed on to the FBI.
As a former counter-terrorist officer, I believe that these apparent lapses in communication are much more likely to have been intentional, rather than a result of incompetence, as the BBC implied. Someone in the CIA would have had to make a decision not to pass on that information. The BBC needed to ask who and why. The programme presented a former FBI agent who said that the FBI had no specific information in the run-up to 9/11.
I knew there was another attack planning. I knew there was another attack coming. And the obvious question behind that is, well, why didn't you do something about it? We had no specific information. It was just this gut feeling. It was just this, they're planning something. We would see the planning, the communications or whatever we were monitoring would drop off, and then you'd know, this is not a good time.
Why did the BBC not inform the viewer about the number of cases where FBI agents were kept from investigating Al-Qaeda suspects in the run-up to 9/11? Back in the year 2000, FBI counter-terrorism agent Ken Williams was pulled off an investigation into suspected terrorists training at a flight school in Phoenix. In July 2001, he wrote a memo in which he stated that he believed Al-Qaeda was planning an imminent airborne attack and recommended that flight schools throughout the US be investigated. The memo was apparently disregarded by FBI chiefs. Former FBI agent Colin Rowley claimed that the Bureau could have identified several of the hijackers before 9/11 if FBI HQ hadn't blocked an investigation in Minneapolis.
Now, in large organizations, you do have a breakdown of communication at the lower end. There was never any top-down orders either by the FBI or CIA, and anybody believes that's just, they're wrong.
Yet BBC journalist Greg Palast revealed that the FBI had been restricted from investigating members of the bin Laden family prior to 9/11, but the conspiracy files chose not to interview him.
I couldn't find a shred of evidence that George Bush knew about the September 11th attack coming. But why didn't our intelligence agencies know?
This document is marked secret and WF, which means it walked its way out of the Washington Bureau of the FBI. It indicates that before the attack of September 11th, agents had wanted to question two members of a very powerful family for their connections to a suspected terrorist organization, Omar and Abdullah bin Laden. But the agents weren't allowed to. Now, what makes this family so special that they're protected from investigation?
John O'Neill was regarded by many as the FBI's leading authority on Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. In August 2001, he resigned from his position in counter-terrorism at the Bureau, protesting that his investigations into bin Laden had been opposed and obstructed by the Bush White House in the interests of the US oil industry. In September 2001, he got a new job working in security at the World Trade Center, where he reportedly died on 9/11.